As the president ramps up his offensive against Robert Mueller, he's also speaking out about the ongoing federal investigation into his former lawyer, Michael Cohen. Trump's longtime chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg, this man, has been granted immunity in exchange for information about Cohen and Trump's hush money payments to women. In an interview today with Bloomberg News, the president was asked whether he felt Weisselberg had betrayed him.
100% he didn't.
Okay.
100%. He's a wonderful guy. It was a very limited little period of time.
Bloomberg reports that the very limited little period of time refers to Weisselberg's cooperation with prosecutors. There's also new reporting from the New York Times tonight that Trump and Michael Cohen may have tried to buy more than those women's silence. Quote, he and his lawyer at the time, Michael D. Cohen, devised a plan to buy up all the dirt on Mr. Trump that the National Enquirer and its parent company had collected on him, dating back to the 1980s, according to several of Mr. Trump's associates. The Times reports that the plan was never finalized and adds that it was hinted at in a secret recording released last month of Cohen and Trump discussing the payoffs. Meanwhile, the president's current attorney, Rudy Giuliani, tells the Daily Beast today that the Trump legal team is, quote, crafting a counter report that will seek to delegitimize special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation and present countervailing arguments. Giuliani says it'll include, quote, possible conflicts of interest by federal law enforcement authorities, allegations of Trump campaign collusion with Russian government agents, and obstruction of justice allegations. Back with me to talk about this, Mimi Rocah and Barbara McQuade. Barbara, again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just having trouble getting my head around how Giuliani and his legal team are crafting or have crafted a defense to something that has not been disclosed and is not out there yet.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. I mean, I think that tells you that it's really more of a propaganda piece, a PR piece, than a legal piece. You can't really reach legal conclusions until you know what the facts are. And what Robert Mueller is doing is collecting the facts. That's what you do when you talk to witnesses and you gather documents and you look at all of those things. And then based on those things, you decide whether some law has been broken. Without seeing what those facts are, it's really impossible. I imagine that Giuliani and his crew can look at what's been publicly reported and try to craft legal arguments around that. But until you know all the facts, it's really impossible to respond to it. And so that's why I think this document really is just nonsense and more of a public relations vehicle than any sort of legal document.
Mimi, as we were talking about in the last block, Giuliani's not apparently new to this law thing. He has been a lawyer and a senior and important lawyer in the government for a long time. He must know that this public relations campaign is not the same as a legal response to the Mueller investigation.
He absolutely does. And, you know, I think it's important to say, because people may not know this, if this were a case in court, you know, if there was a judge presiding over this, Giuliani would not be allowed to say these things. The lawyer ethical rules would prohibit it. So, you know, what he's doing is he's taking advantage of the fact that there is no technically pending case with the judge, and he can just go and say whatever he feels like saying, apparently. I mean, I've said several times, I think some other people have said that I think if he hasn't already crossed the line, he's very close to crossing the line of breaking ethical rules. But it is complicated because, you know, we're in this sort of unknown, uncharted territory of an investigation. You know, is Trump a party to that investigation? But the point that people, I think, should understand is that Giuliani well knows that he can get away with this because this isn't in a court of law. And so he's just taking advantage of that and saying things that most criminal defense attorneys would not say or do.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.